Greetings and salutations, friends. I hope you have been doing well. Today I'm doing a highly requested video, and that is my video editing workflow. I get dozens of questions asking not only what types of software I use, but how I just go through and edit my videos, especially if it's for YouTube or it's a short film or any different types of projects that I work on. I'm editing just about every day, honestly, and in order for me to be efficient not only with my time but with the footage that I'm working with, and making sure that I have an efficient workflow so that if I need to go back and find some footage or anything like that, I'm able to do it efficiently. Now, before this video begins, I'd like to thank Squarespace for sponsoring this video. If you guys have any needs for building a website, Squarespace is the place to do it, so stick around to the end of the video and I will talk more about that later. Now, when it comes to filmmaking and photography, it is very important that you have a workflow that works efficiently for you and the types of equipment that you're using and the types of projects that you're going to be doing. Now, this is a process that has worked for me and might work for you depending on the types of stuff you're doing, like I said, but it's taken me about a year for me to really kind of figure out how to do it and hone in the techniques that I'm using that might be helpful for you. Now, obviously the very first step is your SD card. Now, depending on the type of camera you're using and whether you're shooting in 4K or 120 frames per second, there are different SD cards that will work best for you, and there will be faster transfer speeds. But I do recommend everyone having some kind of SD card case, because you can never have too many SD cards, and they're just a really great way for you to protect your footage, and that if you ever run out of space, you can just grab a new SD card. Now, next up, obviously what you need is a dongle. Since I'm using the new MacBook Pro that doesn't have an SD card reader, I need to put my SD card into here that will go into my MacBook Pro so that it can read the footage. Now, when it comes to hard drives, this once again comes down to the types of projects that you are going to be editing, how often you're going to be editing, and also how much storage you're going to be needing. What I recommend, and what has kind of worked for me recently, is have a main hard drive that you're going to be editing all your main footage off of, and then once this fills up, back it up into a backup hard drive. So right now I have the Samsung portable SSD, which is basically a faster, more efficient way for you to edit your footage, because it's able to transfer files a lot faster than your traditional hard drives because it's an SSD, and it's also a lot more reliant because there's not an internal disk that's spinning inside of here like a traditional hard drive, so that your storage is going to be a lot safer just in case you happen to drop it or anything like that. Now, I have had the problem of a hard drive failing on me, and that is literally the worst feeling, so I always recommend backing up even your backup hard drive. So I haven't done it yet, but I should within the next few weeks, of backing this hard drive up into another hard drive so that I have backups on backups just in case this one goes haywire. So right now we're going to be using this. Once again, I have it velcroed to the back of my laptop. Now, for me, USB-C always seems to be working the best because it is the most native with my MacBook Pro, and it's also the fastest transfer speed. So what I'm going to be doing now is transferring over the files from my SD card to the hard drive. Alright, so as you can see, my SD card has just popped up here. Now I like to put it into two different windows. I'll go into private, which is where the video files are stored, and for root, clip, and then if you go into group, you're able to change it by kind, show all, and this is all the footage that is on this SD card currently, just the video footage. Now, if I go into my Samsung T5, which is my hard drive, I have different folders named for finished videos, important photos, Lightroom, which is where I import all of my raw photos, movies, just like movies that I've downloaded, Photoshop projects, and then Premiere projects. So this is where we're going to Premiere projects. I'll make a new folder and just kind of name it video editing workflow. Now, as far as like the naming of your folders, that's totally up to you. I just like to keep it simple, something that I know I'm going to be able to find quickly if I need to find it. So I just dragged and dropped a few different clips in there. Now, the great thing about SSD hard drives are that they are super fast, meaning that I'm not going to be having to wait around like 5 to 10 minutes for me to transfer over like 5 gigabytes of footage, especially when I'm filming a lot longer videos. Now, I edit all my videos on Adobe Premiere Pro CC 2019. This is the Creative Cloud version. I am using the student discount for a monthly subscription service. For someone like me who's editing constantly and needs Photoshop, needs Lightroom, Premiere Pro, After Effects, a lot of the different Adobe software, it's the best bang for your buck for me to just get the subscription service. Now, when I make a new project, I like to save it in the folder that I'm actually going to be working in, just so I have the project file with the files accompanying it. Once again, I just name it like the same thing as the name of the folder, just to keep it simple. And then this is what Premiere Pro looks like. It does seem a little daunting at first. When I first opened it up, I was like, what the hell is this? I have no idea how to use it, because at first I was using Final Cut Pro, but my friends told me, man, you gotta switch over to Premiere Pro. There's just so much more flexibility. That nuance is totally up to you. It depends on, the software that you have and the budget and, your needs and as an editor. So for me, Premiere Pro works fine. Final Cut Pro is also a really great work system. So if I go into here, I will just press Command A, deselect the project file, and just import that into there. Now, on this section right here, this is where your files are held. This is called your bin, or whatever you like to call it. I will just sort them by name so that they go in chronological order, and that's just easy for me to find them. Next, I will press this little paper icon right here and hit new sequence. I like to do 1080p 24 frames per second, and that's just a simple way for me to make sure that my entire timeline is 24 frames per second. That is an entire new topic, but any video you edit should be in 24 frames per second. That doesn't mean you need to be filming in 24 frames per second. You can film in 60 or 120 frames and then transform that to fit into a 24 frames per second timeline. If none of that makes sense, don't worry, I will make future videos about that later, but for now, that's all we need to know. So let's just say that I'm going to be dragging like 3 clips onto the timeline here. So these are just 3 clips I've taken from a photo shoot I did a while ago in Dallas. But let's just say I want to make it into a short cinematic sequence. What I'm going to do is I have on my desktop a folder called assets, and assets is where I keep all of my different YouTube files, music, overlays, graphics, anything that is considered an asset. I will keep it on my desktop just so it's easy to access. So I have a folder for my YouTube music. Let's just like drop my homie the Carter Sue. Check him out on Spotify. So once again, I've dragged this music file onto the timeline. I'm going to mute the audio file for the raw video clips just because I don't need that. Or I could do select them all, press Command L, and that will deselect the audio, and I could just delete that because we're not going to need that. Now, if I don't know what film rate I was filming in, I can press Command Shift X, and that will pull up this little screen here and show me that this was filmed in 120 frames, meaning that I'm going to be able to slow this down to 20%. I know I'm talking really fast, and this might just sound like gibberish for a lot of people, but this isn't meant to be a beginner's tutorial. This is if you kind of know the basics of filmmaking. But basically, if I have 120 frames and I'm trying to fit into a 24 frames per second timeline, that means I can do 120 times 0.2, which is 20%, and that will give me 24 frames. So if I press Command R and then change the speed to 20%, I'm going to ripple edit shifting trailing clips, meaning that it's going to extend the entire clip, and that will slow this down to 120 frames per second. Now obviously this is super buttery smooth, and with the Sony a7R III I am able to shoot 120 frames per second, and it just looks really good slowed down. So I'm just going to do a really quick edit and then I'll kind of get back to you. Okay, I literally did that in like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, so it's a very rough job. I like didn't put much thought into it. I was just doing what I would usually do, which is basically kind of try and match the beats of the song with the pace of the videos, and I didn't do a really good job on this one because the track doesn't really mix the vibe of the film, but it's whatever. But basically this is what it's going to look like.
Look at the times I fell, look at the time it tells. Took all the time to tell you about the time in hell. Look at the times I fell, look at the time it tells. Took all the times to tell you about the time in hell. Time it's racing fast, life is moving past. Shadow overcast, how long will it last? Started counting days till I fade away. Who can save the day? I'm lost in all my ways. Time is racing.
So that was obviously a very rough job, but you can kind of tell what I was doing here is basically there's a little bit of slow motion, there's a little bit of speed ramping, which is basically, I'll show it right here, but if I zoom into this clip and then you press the FX, you will go into time remapping and then speed. You can kind of adjust the ramp of your video clip, meaning that I put a marker here and then I put a marker here and then it looks like this. So basically, once again, I'll show it again. Boom. You can adjust these right here to kind of drag it out, and then adjust these little things right there to kind of give it a little bit of a smoother time ramp. Now the last thing I would probably do on this is go into that little paper thing, get an adjustment layer, press OK. Now if I drag this adjustment layer over the top of it, now what an adjustment layer basically does is basically like a filter for an Instagram photo. You just put it on top of your video clips and it's going to apply that to all the video clips below it. Now if I go into the adjustment layer, press the creative tab, there's this drop down menu called a look. Now this is where all your LUTs are. Obviously you can see there are a bunch of different ones. The one that I usually like to go through is Cinelut A7 III V3 Faded. This is made specifically for Sony cameras. I bought it off Christian Mate Grab. I will have it linked down below, but it looks really good on a lot of my different film, and if I'm filming an S-Log 2 or Cine 2, which are the profiles that I like to use, then it looks great. Obviously you can tell that this is what it looks like. It honestly looks pretty good without doing a bunch of other adjustments. The colors seem a little bit saturated because the intensity is at 100, so I like to drop it to maybe like 75 or right around here. If there are individual clips that need to be adjusted, you don't have to adjust the entire adjustment layer, because you can click on the individual video clip, go into the basic correction, and then you can just color correct that individually. So right now it's a little bit overexposed, so I'm going to drop down the highlights. You can kind of see what that's doing here. Drop down the whites, bring out a little bit of contrast, and you can already tell that looks a lot better. Now this is what it looks like before and after. Now, kind of the last step, sometimes I do this, sometimes I don't. It depends on the type of video I'm working on, but let's say I want to add a cinematic bar, which is basically like a widescreen bar. I will go into the effects tab, look up the crop tool, throw that on the adjustment layer, because that once again will affect all the layers below it. Go into the effect controls. Let's just say I usually like to do the top and the bottom are 6, and you can just see it's put that cinematic bars on there. So that is about it just for this little short cinematic sequence. Now let's talk about exporting. So what I will do is I will go to the end of the sequence, press O on my keyboard, which will select everything before it. Press Command M, which is a shortcut for your exports. It will pull up this dialog here, which can look a little bit scary, but I will just kind of briefly go through it. Right here, which is your output name, you click on that and you can change the name of whatever the file is going to be called. So let's just say video editing short. If you go to your preset, I have made a preset for whenever I'm making a YouTube video, so I will just click that right now. If you go to the source range, I like to do sequence in and out, because that helps me keep it specific to the sequence that was on that timeline. And then you just hit export. Luckily, since this is a pretty short sequence, it's not going to take too long. It's taking about like 20 seconds, which is pretty good, honestly. I will say that Premiere Pro isn't as fast on MacBooks as Final Cut Pro, because obviously it would be faster if it's a native app, but it works well. Once I export, I just kind of wait around until it's done. Anyways, I know I rushed through that. Obviously, it's a lot of information when it comes to video editing and finding a workflow, but that's just what works for me, like I've been saying all along. It does take time to kind of perfect your workflow, and mine's still not perfected. I think a few things that I should work on and can be improved are finding ways to, store my files so that if I need to go back and find them, I'm able to do it quickly without having to go through a bunch of different hard drives. If anyone has any tips for that, make sure to leave it down below. That would be much appreciated. But once again, the sponsor of this video is Squarespace. If you have any types of content that you are making, I highly recommend putting it on a website, on your portfolio, so that other customers and clients can see your work. And especially for me as a freelance photographer and filmmaker, it's important for me to have a credible website that I can show my clients and say, this is the past work that I've done. Obviously, it's high quality, it's good material, and Squarespace is honestly like the easiest resource to do it, because they have so many different layouts. They all look super professional. You have the full flexibility to customize it exactly how you want. They also give you options to integrate a store, so eventually I'm going to be doing presets that I can put on my store. Right now they are offering 10% off your first purchase, so if you haven't started to build a website or portfolio for 2019, I highly recommend you guys get on that. Make sure to check out that link in my description. Anyways, that about wraps it up for this video. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to leave a comment down below, subscribe for more videos, and as always, don't stress, finesse.